It was a place where you hid, but you wouldn't confuse it with a refuge. This wasn't somewhere you chose to flee. It was a coffin into which life placed you, half alive and shrieking under the thin rain of fresh dirt. Open the door and experience the creak of someone battling bronchitis for the second decade running. Dare a breath, and it forged fire in the back of the throat. The walls stood criminal with grime, their grout already found guilty. The ceiling dripped God's tears. A single overhead bulb put in grudging half-time duty, its flicker something out of that low-budget horror film that kept you company at 3 a.m. The paper towels congregated in a puddle on the floor. Some wit had written, "It all dies here," above the toilet, and perhaps he or she had a point. It was hard to distinguish the Poway Humane Shelter bathroom from a prison. I shouldered my backpack, sighed, and made myself move forward. Maybe I should have waited until I got home. 10 minutes of driving past one suburban development after another would bring me there. 2 songs on the radio, 3, tops. 10 more minutes of being like this, and I could take care of myself. It would never last, though. It never did. So, this prison, it wasn't so much a prison as a cage within a cage, the Russian nesting dolls of the present moment. I was in the belly of the beast, nestled up against its chest cavity. I was where things intersected, where it all went down. In a way, the shelter was pregnant with me. Well, I muttered, standing there in the doorway, unable to make myself go any further into this place. It doesn't get any easier from here. I'm Meredith Thomas. At the age of 16, I had a beard. The hair traveled from my upper lip to underneath my chin, from my cheeks to that nameless space along my ears. It made itself at home, not just on my face, but inside the skin, polluting me from the inside out. It pushed up like the poppies that grew wild throughout California. If you wished, you could just watch it happen. It was like magic, clockwork, all those things you could simply set and forget. I wanted to interrupt the process, even though I knew the relief would be temporary. Then I whispered into my collar, "You know what you need to do." The door swung open all the way, barking, gagging. Under my hand, the knob felt as though it had been coated with Vaseline, motor oil, all those things that were slippery and clinging. Maybe it didn't want me to enter. Could it be that that was a sign? They came from everywhere, all the time, charging toward you from the corners you'd never even noticed to begin with. Signs, sure, but how to even start to read them? That was the question. Now I assumed there was a light switch, but where? I thought this might be one of those jobs where the switch was actually outside the room, weird but workable. That wasn't the case. Instead, the wall was smooth and hard, raw and ungiving, like a person with their back to you, deliberate and cold like that. There was no answer here, only questions you didn't get to ask. I guessed the switch was inside the room. Maybe that was a sign right there, right then. I could go inside, and then what? It wasn't as if I hadn't been in this bathroom before. I'd been volunteering at the shelter for the past year. Not knowing where the switch was, that was just a sort of skipping over of the mind, the way the brain just bubbles over and you forget the smallest and most meaningful things alike. It was just that I had never done in there what I was about to do. That made it an entirely other space. There was no way I was going to touch the wall without getting some serious vaccines beforehand. So instead, I took my cell phone and lit up the room. There was the switch, hanging blamelessly right where I'd known it to be. I used the very tip of my pinky to flip it up. What I'd seen before by the light of the hallway now punched me in the nose and mouth and brain. Bearded ladies do what we must. 2 more steps brought me fully inside the room. I nudged the door closed with my foot, vowing to wash the heads once I got home. More than that, I would need to scrub myself from head to the soles of my feet, just for the very fact that I touched this air. Never had it felt like this, like droplets of urine hung about my face, like the oxygen itself needed a deep cleaning. Whether the reality existed outside me or just in my head, it was grossing me out. Still, I set out to shave my face in this grotesque excuse for a bathroom, unhygienic as it might be, convenient as the one at home was. Some people got 5 o'clock shadow. Mine came out right after lunch. I always knew when the stubble had grown sharp and pointed enough to show itself through the foundation makeup that I slathered across my skin. I could always tell when I'd started to look less like a girl and more like a man. It was always that turning point in the day that I hated the most, the moment where it became more possible to be called erroneously, sir.